Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 240. We're getting up there in episodes, already 240 episodes in. I am your host, Michael. Joining me, uh, give me a quick second.
I bet he had
joining me, joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, and Daniel from the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gents?
Top of the morning to you.
some weeks we just can't wait. It's got to go down Monday, and tonight we are in on Monday.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was dealing with the echo from my end, so I had to mute something. For those new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. And when the motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the Rather blog page. You'll find links to where to find us all over social media, Facebook's, Twitter, well, what is to be G Plus before it finally shuts down, as well as where to find the podcast specifically on all available platforms that carries podcast. Mine is Spotify, and there are very few things that are free, including the production of this podcast. So I don't care if it's 50 cents, $1, $2, $5, $10, whatever you can spare. When you go to the blog page, you will also see two donate links. One Cash Me, one PayPal. Really help us out for the production on the production end. Want to thank Jacob who sent a dono last week. Going to use that to get some equipment. So yeah, you can spare us whatever pocket change you have. You have some available change, particularly folks are finally getting their refunds. Shoot us a couple of dollars, or shoot us a couple of dollars to Pound for Pound Box Report. Let's get things started this evening. Going to Indio, California. Going to Gail first, since she was there. I was writing this card. I was recapping this card for Three Kings Boxing. Let's go to Indio, specifically the main event. Alberto Machado, to some, I'll say to some, they viewed him as the top fighter at 130 pounds at junior lightweight. I personally felt he was the hardest puncher at junior lightweight. He fought unknown to many, Andrew Cancio, and arguably the upset of the year, as after getting himself up from being knocked down in the first round, Cancio dusted himself off, and quite frankly, he gave Machado hell. He came forward blasting, took the fight to Machado from that point on, won the second round, had a tremendous third round, and in the fourth round, he got to Machado with body shots, put him down 3 times, and stopped him, becoming the new WBA junior lightweight champion. Machado, Gail, he didn't fight the most intelligent fight. I don't know what happened to the jab, but I do not want to take away credit for Cancio. Kind of smaller version of a Rocky-like story for him. Again, upset of the year, and folks are still talking about it.
Hey, it's February. We got a long way to go in the boxing year 2019, but this is a really terrific starter on the upset of the year category. Yeah, Cancio was working his way up the ranks of the division and suffered 2 losses, the second of which was to Jojo Diaz 2 years ago. It was on the undercard of pay-per-view, so it was seen by a lot of people. And at that point, he really thought hard about, maybe I need to give this up. He's a single dad, and it was in large part his kids, who are now 10 and 7, who said, "No, Dad, you can do this. Go, keep going. This is what you really want to do." His trainers encouraged him, so he thought, "Okay, fine, but in the meantime, I got to make a living." So he got himself a job working for Southern California Gas, and so he works on gas lines, repairing natural gas lines all day. In fact, he had a hard summer repairing a lot of gas lines after the big wildfires in the Ventura County, Oxnard, Los Angeles Valley areas. So here's a guy who gets up 4 a.m, goes and does a 5-mile run, puts in a full day of work, does his workouts and his sparring at night, day after day, week after week. So he rolled up a couple of victories, gets this opportunity against Machado. And, who could say no to that in his position? And his hometown is just a little less than 100 miles east of where the fight took place in Indio, a little tiny town of less than 20,000 people in the high desert of California called Blythe, California. Look up Blythe. You think, did anybody famous ever come from Blythe? Well, apparently one time there was a guy who played briefly in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins, who's from Blythe. Other than that, Andrew Cancio is arguably the most famous person ever from Blythe, California. He gets in there, and to his credit, he executed the perfect game plan. He said, with a tall guy like that, you've got to fight inside. You got to get right up in his grill. You got to, crowd him. You cannot let him work the jab. You cannot let him work at distance. You can't let him tee off. Well, in the first round, he hadn't quite gotten the jitters out and he got popped. He said it surprised him more than anything. It didn't really hurt him seriously. He said it, if anything, that it really sort of shook him up and woke him up. And frequently you'll hear fighters say that it kind of knocks some sense into him, if you will. And from that moment on, once he recovered and got out of the rounds 2, 3, and 4, it was his fight. The guy who makes his opponent fight his version of the game plan is the guy who will win. And that's what Cancio did. And this was a picture perfect textbook, should be a chapter in a boxing textbook on how to fight going to the body, how to use a body attack to bust a guy up, break him down, and punish him. And that's exactly what Cancio did. The vast majority of this fight was successful because he was taking advantage of that long, tall guy in front of him with a lot of body to work with. And then once Machado started being forced to cover up and forget his defense elsewhere, then he can tag him, weaken him more. But in the end, it was the body shots that took him down 3 times until the referee finally stopped the fight. And he was elated. The crowd was elated. Fantasy Springs is not a very large arena. It was packed. And because he's from the area and has so many family, friends, supporters, coworkers, I swear every single one of them showed up. They were loud. They were proud. They were flying his T-shirts and colors. And if any crowd could will a guy to win, it was that crowd. And they were well rewarded. Machado later said that he just didn't feel like himself that night. It was just a bad night. He didn't make many excuses. He really didn't have a whole lot to say. Trainer Freddie Roach later in the evening kind of just shrugged his shoulders and said, hey, that's boxing. That's why you have the fights. But it was truly a thrilling moment. And darn it, Cancio was a 15-1 underdog by the start of the fight. If we just put a few bucks down, we could have funded the pound for pound report the rest of the year. Dang it.
I know, right?
Shoot, yeah, I'm killing me. But all in all, a great evening for a very deserving guy. Fortunately, he had the day off today, but he has to go back to work tomorrow. And then we'll see what happens. And we'll talk about what's next for him, I'm sure, in a little bit later in the show.
I'll go to you, Jacob, and then you can follow up Daniel in assessing the fight, whether live or maybe you missed it and watched it maybe in the following days afterwards. What was the thing that surprised you most about what you saw? The fact that how Cancio got up, the way he really pounded Machado in the once he got up from the knockdown, or what Machado did not do?
I think what Machado did not do, because he had the height and the reach advantage. He got pretty good pop on his punches, and he seemed to, maybe he thought that he had, this was going to be an easy walkthrough as pointing to the odds, and in the sense that he knocked him down, and I believe he did hurt him. Cancio could say whatever he wants, but I think he was stung a little bit by that punch. And so he it seemed like he threw his whole game plan out of the water. And then once he got caught, he stopped using his jab and stopped keeping, he let Cancio come in. And that basically, credit to him, he like Gail said, he let him fight his fight, and he got drawn into that. And, that was his undoing.
Sorry, I was on mute. Daniel, your biggest surprise in terms of watching the fight, Brick assessing Cancio's, again, upset stoppage win over a Machado.
Probably the biggest surprise was how Machado pretty much abandoned the jab after the first knockdown. It feels like Jacob's right in the sense that it felt like Machado, after he saw him knock out Cancio, thinking this is probably going to be an easy night. So I have to establish my jab. So I'm going to go over there and knock him out. And Cancio was all game for that, because unfortunately, with abandoning his jab, left Machado open to the one thing you can't do when you're a tall fighter for your division and you don't establish the jab. You leave your body open. And that's how Cancio hurt Machado. It wasn't a headshot. It was all body shots. And Machado left that area wide open. Cancio grinded it out. And ultimately, I think it was a straight left, not even a hook, a straight left that landed right on the liver and it dropped Machado. And Cancio took care of business, noticing that Machado never really recovered from it. Now, I did read those reports, like Gail mentioned, that Machado does feel weak. We have to remember also, I think he fought recently. I think about 2 or 3 months ago. He did fight recently, and when you're a fighter that's pretty big for your division, that at some point is going to catch up with you. So it may be the best thing to do to move up to lightweight and see how he can help there, because he still has the frame. He's still going to be a pretty big lightweight for his division. So all credit to Cancio, though. Like I said, I'm calling him the West Coast version of Joe Smith in a way, because Joe Smith, he's the same way. He works at a construction shop and he fights for this time. And he has a chance now to do the same now with Dimitri Bivol. Could you imagine that? Could you really imagine that in boxing, that where at the end of before the year's over, you have 2 champions, one from the West Coast, one from the East Coast, that are real working class champions that have jobs, that have built things, like Cancio's building gas lines and Joe Smith's building buildings. So that'll be a heartwarming story. Like it's up to Joe Smith to complete it, but for Cancio, it's one of the best stories in the month. And I have not heard. There are very, very few crowds that have been as loud as what we saw with Cancio. But wow, that time deserved it.
And it's funny, Daniel. Joe Smith's name came up among quite a few of us over the weekend. How similar the stories are, and there's something to be said for these guys who have that kind of drive, that kind of work ethic, and as long as their body doesn't wear out, that physical work that they do every day, they don't need a strength and conditioning coach when they're working a jackhammer like Cancio does frequently, or the digging trenches like Joe Smith does. You know, as long as they do not get hurt, as long as they aren't subject to, say, repetitive motion injuries, they're doing good, solid, hardcore, you know, low drag physical labor, just constant drill. And yeah, they don't need to lift weights. They don't need to mess with any of that stuff. You know, they get a little bit of cardiovascular conditioning in to go rounds, and then they spar. And honestly, that's all they need to do. That's it.
I'm going back.
I was
Go
gonna say
ahead,
another great thing about this story though is that, you know, as opposed to when Adrien Broner fought, and, you know, I talked about like how he doesn't really deserve the chances. I'm glad someone like this, you know, with this story that he has, got a chance, and then, you know, he proved, you know, what Gelhan mentioned earlier, this is why they fight, right? Because even being a heavy underdog, you know, we never really know what the outcome's going to be. We can all pretend that we know, but that's what I think heightens a sport for me, is that there's the dramatics of it, and the way it's like you can't even write a script like it you know, it always has that surprising factor. So you know, my hat's off to him, and you know, it's just a really good story, I think, for boxing.
I'm going back to you, Gail. Like I said, you was there ringside covering the fight for Communities Digital News. You had some time to you had the opportunity to spend some time with Team Cancio after the fight. Get some details in terms of what his camp was talking about after the fight, what could be possibly up next. Personally, I think it's going to be a mandatory, but what were they saying? A, B, did you hear anything from Team Machado, his trainer or whatnot, trying to explain what exactly went wrong Saturday?
Well, let's take the second part of that first. The only formal comments that came from Machado were relayed to us from back in the dressing room, which was essentially, you know, I had a bad night. I mean, it was an off night. I wasn't feeling it. Kind of a shoulder shrug, if you will. Now, the speculation among a lot of us is that perhaps Machado is starting to have trouble making weight at this division at 130. Machado is 5'10". He's a really, really tall man for this division. And he is starting to head toward 30. And hey, maybe the deal is he had to fight a little harder. It was a little rougher for him to make weight. And if that's true, and he was weakened by it, then you have a little bit of an excuse to hang this fight on. Not entirely, but it's a factor. And he did say that he would think about moving up a division to 135. However, he does have a rematch clause. I'm sure Machado is going to lean in very hard to that. And so we'll see what happens. There's also a mandatory. So we'll see who that could be. There's a third option. Now, what Team Cancio and what Andrew really want in their heart of hearts, he wants a rematch with Joseph Diaz Jr., the guy who, you know, set his career aside by a knockout almost 3 years ago. So he wants revenge on Diaz. So whatever comes next, Diaz is in his gun sights. Diaz is who he wants. So we'll see.
Diaz, who fought on the undercard of this bout, beating a guy by the name of Huerta over the distance.
Yeah, and interestingly, both Diaz Jr., who has been a rising star in the Golden Boy stable, who's been stalled a little bit, he's trying to get back on track. Both Diaz Jr. and Cancio have gone up a division since their first fight, which is also a bit interesting. So you got Machado, you got Diaz, and you've got, you know, the mandatory TBD. All good options. When one of his family members asked me, I said, here's the deal. You take the fight with the biggest number of zeros on the paycheck, end of story. So hopefully he'll get some good advice. He seems like a very head on his shoulders guy. You know, he's a single dad. His 2 kids were in the ring. If you watch the DAZN stream, they were with him. And his whole goal, other than getting back on track and getting that championship belt, he's done that, is to buy a house for his kids. How refreshing. Jacob is right. This is not an Adrien Broner. This is not a guy who immediately wanted to go to the club, right? And party or buy himself some toys. When I really pressed him in an interview last week, you know, if he won, you know, might he treat himself to something? The only thing he could even think of was maybe, you know, a little kind of a desert little dune buggy for him and his kids. It was all he could think of. That was it.
Last word, Jacob, about this fight and about what Cancio, pulled off before we move on to the other fights.
Not too much more to add. I mean, again, I think it's a really good, you know, boxing. It needs its good stories. Boxing has plenty of black eyes, in the sense of you know, troubles outside the ring, or performance enhancing, or promotional and stuff. So, to be able to do what he's done, which is basically kind of lift up a city, and like Gail said, he's all about his kids, and that's a good, he's goes to work every day. This is not even his full-time job, but he's doing that for his family. I mean, he's become a prime example of what you can accomplish, if you believe in yourself and you do the things that you need to, sans any type of physical advantages that you might not have. Just the hard work, will pay off. You just got to believe. And so, it's a great story. And, hopefully he'll get that fight with Jojo Diaz, because I think, he's earned the right for, a redemption.
Let's move on to some more fights. Unless y'all want to talk, unless Gail, since she was there, want to talk about any of the other fights, on that Machado Sancio card.
We'll roll through them quickly. They were all solid matchups. There were no real blowouts. Joseph Diaz was back in the ring. He fought a guy that he's known all his life, another local LA guy who's been a sparring partner with him, Charles Huerta. They know each other very well. So it was friends fighting. I think that could have accounted for the kind of the lack of firepower, willingness to really deliver punishment to each other. Diaz had the fight though pretty much in hand. It was a blowout on the cards. Ray Vargas had a very rough fight against his opponent. He fought a fighter out of Venezuela named Frankie Manzanilla, who's absolutely known for all the dirty tricks. I mean, he combined the Orlando Salido playbook with, bits and pieces of a whole bunch of other guys who are known to get nasty. And he did. And it made for a big, messy fight. He pissed Vargas off. He pissed off the referee several times. He got 2 points docked for rabbit punches. And once again, a blowout on the cards. So although the fight, went all kind of 12 rough and tumble rounds, the one other fight that was sort of a head scratcher, middleweight Turiano Johnson, who at one time was scheduled to fight David Lemieux, and Lemieux got injured and the fight was canceled. Then Johnson got himself injured. He's just had a rough time ever since, kind of getting back on track. So this was to be a little bit of a start on coming back. He hasn't had a fight in a couple of years. And it was rough, and it ended up being a draw. So where Johnson goes from here, who knows? Lots of other good prospects. These are fun cards to watch because you see guys getting a chance who are the youngsters in a promoter's stable. These are good fights for them, good exposure. They're in front of big crowds. And at least in Southern California, the crowds tend to get into the seats for the early fights. So all in all, we did not get actual attendance numbers, but if it wasn't technically a sellout, it was pretty darn close. And as a bonus for the fans, there was a meet and greet with Ray Mercer. So that was a lot of fun.
Indeed. Let's move on to some other fights. Gail was at the card in Indio. Jacob was at the card at Carson. at the place formerly known as StubHub, watching Gervonta Davis fight Hugo Ruiz. Last week we talked about this fight. We previewed this fight. We all were all agreed that, look, Hugo Ruiz, who was replacing Abner Mars, is not much difference, in that Tank would make easy work of Ruiz, and he did just that, Jacob. After the Michael Jackson influence ring walk and whatnot, it was basically the first hard punch that Tank landed. Ruiz got hurt and went down and stayed down. Your thoughts on what you saw, your impressions of Tank, and the reaction of the crowd to Tank's one-round stoppage win over Ruiz.
Yeah, the ring walk was actually more exciting than the fight, to tell you the truth. The crowd was pretty split. You had it's Southern California, so you had a big Mexican crowd there, because this was part of a triple header. So there's some other fighters in the card. But he got a lot of boos, but he got a lot of cheers. And there's a lot of boxers there that kind of hang around in the same circles. Mayweather, Broner, Charlos, Jared Hurd, Benavides. I mean, there was tons of them, and then there was tons of rappers like Drake and Lil Wayne and stuff. They were all there, but yeah, I mean, Ruiz didn't do basically anything, and Jack Reese, gave him a shot. He did get to his feet, and he asked him even in Spanish, do you want to continue? And he gave no response, and so I don't know if he was just picking up a paycheck or what, but he basically didn't do anything. It was just a wipeout.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Your reaction to what you saw from, I guess, that fight between Tank and Ruiz. Easy work. Everybody saw it coming.
To put it in one word, disgusting. We knew that this was going to happen. This Ruiz is just at most a blown up junior featherweight that got moved to junior lightweight for a fight after, we mentioned last week, after he fought 10 rounds in his last fight not too long ago. So this was bound to happen, unfortunately. And from the looks of it, he broke his nose pretty badly, because he was bleeding from the mouth, he was bleeding from the nose. It's obvious that he wasn't able to recover, and the fight served its purpose. If the purpose was just to get Gervonta Davis a knockout, you would have gotten that with Ruiz, which you did. You would have gotten that with Abner Mares. The only thing is, Abner Mares probably would have put up a better fight, because he's known to put up pretty good fights afterwards. And it just really was a bad fight. Probably the more exciting things were the 4 fights that Jacob got to see afterwards, after the Showtime broadcast, because I think he said that's how many fights there were after the main event.
Yeah, the main event. There was actually, I think there was when I originally looked at the card, I think there was 14 fights, but then there was even 2 other fights that they didn't even put on the card that I ended up seeing. So yeah, there was 4 fights after the main event, and actually there was some pretty brutal knockouts. So yeah, those were actually more entertaining than the main card fight.
Your reaction to what you saw, Gail, from Tank Davis and Ruiz.
I'm still scratching my head over the fact that the California State Athletic Commission permitted Hugo Ruiz to step in as an opponent to a guy like Tank Davis barely 3 weeks after having gone 10 very hard rounds on an undercard fight on the Pacquiao Broner card in Vegas. And Ruiz was originally supposed to be the B-side in that fight on the Pac Broner undercard against Jack Tapora from the Philippines. Tapora blew through the weight, knew he wasn't going to make weight. They had a standby opponent for Ruiz ready to go. So suddenly Ruiz goes from being the B side to the A side and has a grinded out 10-round fight, wins. And then everyone thinks it's okay for him to get in the ring against Tank Davis 3 weeks later. What do they think they were going to see? Exactly what we got. That is not fair to anybody. I get it. Davis wanted to have a fight. Showtime wanted to have him get some exposure. He'd been training, he wants a payday. He wants, keep his career on track. Really, there was not a single other guy you could find in the division in the top 40 to face him, and admittedly, this division was very, very busy over the weekend. A lot of guys were already booked. I get that. I mean, he didn't have a great fight either, but move Javier Fortuna up into that as the opponent. I mean, something. So very disappointing, unfortunately. I'm glad, though, to hear from you, Jacob, that there were other fights on the card that, nobody watching Showtime got to see. But those of you who paid good hard money for tickets did get a little of your value. Very glad to hear that. And there were, a crazy number of fights on that card. I looked at the bout sheet and thought,
like 16 or something
what?
crazy.
Did they forget a few fights from what they had on the document the last time? And
I usually go to Box Rec and I usually I'll download that whatever the approved card is.
Right.
And then I have it on my phone because when they, I don't know all the fighters, so then when they start walking in, I'll go like, oh, look at the guy's record and see, kind of, do some research on them. And then a couple, it was a women's fight that came out, and I was like, they're not even on this card. And then there was another guy's fight. I was like, I don't see them on this card either. And then, after the event was over, they, they had 4 fights still.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the bout sheet. I mean, I think that's the first time I've ever seen a bout sheet, sent to the media that was 2 pages long. I mean, it was just that long. Pretty crazy evening.
Let's talk the future of Tank Davis here, and everybody can respond to this. You mentioned Javier Fortuna. I think Fortuna fought on the undercard, got a victory, and then he called out Tank Davis afterwards. We just saw Machado lost the same night. Burchelt was scheduled to fight March, I believe it was, but he had to pull out because of a hand injury. 130 is an interesting division. You got Burchelt, Tank, Machado still, Cancio now, Tevin Farmer and Davis has had beef for years now. So where do you see the future of Gervonta Davis? I'm not going to mention the exhibition that Floyd is talking about Tank Davis fighting in April. I refuse, or in March, whenever it is, because that's a joke. But post that, be it at 130 or at 135, given that on his first attempt on the scales, Gervonta Davis, he was a couple of ounces over. So where do you see the future for Tank Davis?
Well, I think we all want to see the Tevin Farmer fight, but I don't think that that's what they're going to do.
And let me also mention the WBO champion Ito from Japan as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're not. I mean, they're not looking. I mean, that fight could be made. I think it's pretty easy makeable fight. They both seem to want the fight, but for some reason it hasn't happened yet. And Tevin Farmer's been very active, but I have a feeling that Tank, his last year, and what did he have, like 1 fight last year, and he's talking about this exhibition fight. I'm not really sure where he's going with I'm not sure he's going to do the things that we want him to do. Let's just put it that way.
I'll go to you, Daniel, and then you can follow up, Gail. In the post-fight presser, Vasiliy Lomachenko's name was mentioned. Floyd called him old. When the actor asked directly about the fight, he said in time, in terms of future opponents for Tank. Are folks really serious about this Tank Davis-Lomachenko fight? Do you think we will see it, say 2020? The direction of Tank Davis, where do you see him going?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to. I know you don't want to mention it, but it's relevant to the fact that, yeah, Tank Davis' next fight apparently is looking to be fighting the guy that Floyd beat up for a pay-per-view in Japan. And that's all you pretty much need to know about what Floyd thinks about Tank's chances against a guy like Tevin Farmer, and especially against a guy like Vasiliy Lomachenko. He knows that Lomachenko could probably embarrass Tank into retirement. And Farmer just couldn't straight beat him right now. Come and outbox him. So apparently he's going to follow the formula of putting Tank in front of guys he knows he can knock out, keep his name up, and see if he can rebuild what his template with Tank. And what I mean in that sense is Floyd have made a fortune off getting people to pay money to hopefully watch him lose. And he's looking like he's going to try to be the same thing with Tank. He's like, just give him these easy fights, have people really be mad that he's not getting the tough fights. Try to call him the WBA junior lightweight champion when we all know that, like we talked about, Cancio beat the real WBA champion, so now Cancio is the real WBA junior lightweight champion. So that's the formula they're going, and it's not really looking good in that sense. Seriously, if you're going to go to Japan, then give me Ito.
Yeah. Gail, what do you see the future for Tank Davis?
Yeah, I think it's been well said. The right thing to do is to start unifying, and there's a lot of options. That is one thing that Cancio mentioned, is that he wants to unify with at least one other person in the division. You're right. Everybody knows that the real belt holder between Davis and Machado, Davis was given this, belt out of a Cracker Jack box, which was really a disservice to him. Everybody knows that his belt isn't the legit belt. The legit belt was in the hands of Machado, is now in the hands of Cancio. And so instead of making a guy like Davis earn it, making him a little hungrier so that he'd go after one of the legit guys, no. You give him a belt, now he can sort of sit back and act like everybody's got to come to him. That's ridiculous. So he needs to go out and earn one of these belts for real. That's the right thing to do. But there are other options. And the issue for these guys in these smaller weight divisions is, a lot of them, because of making weight starting to get harder and harder, can't stay there forever. So that could be a factor. As for Floyd saying Loma is too old, Floyd, what? Floyd, 41 years old?
He didn't say he was too old, but he called him old within the midst of answering.
He called him old.
Yeah.
About to go fight a fellow 40-year-old, and he is calling anybody else old?
He just says those things. He says things for
right.
press.
Right. Well, you know what? Here we all are talking about it. So, please.
How about this?
Come on.
I have an interesting fight. Davis moves up and fights Robert Easter Jr.
Oh, I don't hate that.
Yeah, Easter.
That would be a good fight. Yeah.
He's fighting in, I want to say April. I can't remember the guy's his opponent, but he is having a fight coming up. But isn't that fight at 140 pounds?
Yeah, Easter moved up, I think, because I think he was having trouble making that weight. But that would be a decent fight to make.
Because PBC, right? They're friendly with PBC. Floyd is. So, I think the other problem is that Top Rank and Floyd. I don't know how friendly they are. And then Golden Boy, with the whole Machado Cancion thing, so again, it's like, what are the realistic fights that can be made versus, and again, the Tevin Farmer fight I think can be made, but
that's what I'm holding out for. That fight needs to happen. Tank Davis and Tevin Farmer, that fight needs to happen.
Well, it depends really, because you have to remember Tevin Farmer actually has a promoter. He has an actual promoter in Lou DiBella, but he's with the Zone now. So it has to be Tank goes to the Zone, or Farmer goes to Showtime. So that's going to be an interesting deal happening. But what probably makes as much as fun as a fight between Easter and Tank would be, main reason I don't see it happening is, okay, yes, Floyd and PBC are cool. They are reasonable business partners. But who has Robert Easter's ear? Adrien Broner. And we know how Broner feels when dealing with Floyd.
Broner was at the fight. He seemed they were all cool. I mean,
no, he's at the fight because Robert Easter was at the fight. They hang out together, but
yeah, if you look at Instagram, Tank hangs out with Broner and the Charlos, and they all hang out together.
Yeah, they hang out together, but the problem is when they may do business together, suddenly the bad things that may come up. But it's the easiest fight to make between the three. But I think Robert Easter is fighting at 140 next, so
fighting Bartholomew,
that may take it out of the running.
Looked up fighting Bartholomew. I want to say 130. That could be 140. That could be 135 because both Bartholomew and Easter, I think, ranked second and third respectively by one of the sanctioning bodies at 135 pounds. So in terms of Tank Davis, I'm still holding out hope that he fights Tevin Farmer. It's just too much of a natural matchup. Styles, neither guy likes each other. Both they can both make good money. Of course, you have to go through some red tape with promotional and stuff, all that stuff. Excuse me, but
it is 135.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But yeah, Tank and Farmer, that's the fight I want. Or Tank fight Ito, or whoever. But for me, guy, I just want to see Tank active, not that exhibition nonsense that we're supposedly going to see. But he's too talented of a fighter, in spite the criticisms that folks may have of him. Gervonta Davis is too talented of a fighter to be sitting on the shelf doing nothing, because mainly he tends to put on a lot of weight in between fights. So one, because of his talent, and two, to keep his weight down. I want to see him active. Bottom line for me.
And Gray pressed him for that during the post fight, and he said, now we saw you early in this year. Do you think we're going to see you? And I think Tank even said, he and this is crazy. I mean, going from one fight to saying that he's going to fight 4 times this year. That's what he said.
Let's hope he lives up to his word. Let's move on to this show is being recorded Monday, February 11th. Last night, February 10th, another Sunday card took place on ESPN. I've only seen.
Quick, Mike, can I highlight a couple other fights on that card?
Oh, sure.
So, the Fortuna fight, that was an ugly fight, but the Mario Barrio, he fought Richard Zamora, and this he had a shaky start, but this kid's pretty good. He's undefeated, 22-0, welterweight. But I look out for this kid. I mean, he seems pretty good. And there was a return of Erickson Lubin and against Ishii Smith. And I know Ishii Smith isn't he's older and he's and all that, but he's never been stopped before. And at the weigh-ins, they were talking some mad trash to each other. I mean, they were like in each other's face, barking at each other. And Lubin basically, beat him. So he's looking to get back into the, into the picture. I think he's now fighting at maybe almost middleweight now, or junior middleweight. But There was a couple other good cards, but those are like as far as like names or whatever, like maybe people to look out for.
Okay, sure. Let's move on to the Fresno card. I've seen parts of this card that took place last night because I wasn't able to see the fights live. I'll go to you, Daniel. Let's talk about the main event of that Fresno card, as Jose Ramirez defending his junior welterweight title WBC version against Jose Cepeda. I've seen the fight once, but I'm a little bit leery on giving kind of my analysis of it because I've only seen it once. A lot of times I like to see the fight 2-3 times to give an accurate assessment. When I watched it the one time, I felt the fight could have gone either way. It was first half, second half. First half was Zepeda doing a very good job of boxing. Second half of the fight, Ramirez came on, though Zepeda, he hung in there and stayed and fought tough. I've heard folks say that Ramirez deserved the verdict. I've read others on boxing Twitter and whatnot. They felt that Zepeda won. I'll go to you, Daniel, and then you can follow up, Gail and Jacob. Your thoughts on the fight. Who do you think won? And your view of Ramirez, because one of the things I've also read about Ramirez is that he looked a little bit off. I felt that way too, watching it the one and only time. He felt a little bit off. He looked a little bit off, excuse me.
Well, there's a lot of things to break down in that fight. It's a fight where the score was a majority decision. It went, one judge had it a draw, one judge had it 115, 113, and one judge had it 116, 112 for Ramirez. And those are all fair scorecards when it comes to this fight. Because Cepeda gave Ramirez a fight. And this is pretty much something that's prevalent that happens when it comes to a lot of Robert Garcia fighters. Like, he can develop a really good style, really fan-friendly style, but it's a style that you can be outboxed in. And that's what Cepeda was doing. Not only was he outboxing him, it was the typical southpaw orthodox dilemma. So you saw Cepeda understand that early. Ramirez didn't establish the jab early on, so he wasn't able to get in when he wanted to. But that started to... two things happened that changed the turn of the fight. In the fifth round, Ramirez landed a beautiful body shot on Cepeda. Absolutely beautiful. And I think it was in the 6th or 7th round, there was a clash of heads that caused a cut on Jose Ramirez. However, the referee said it came from a punch, meaning that if that fight would have stopped in that cut, it would have been a TKO victory for Zepeda. So I think that really pushed the ante for Jose Ramirez. He started getting better combinations going. He started coming forward with a little bit more aggression. But Zepeda was hanging on. Like, he was still using that template. The problem was that after that 5th round, he was not going to be able to hold off the body attack that Ramirez was throwing and be able to fully last. He did his best, but that wasn't going to be a successful plan if he didn't make major adjustments. It's an all pretty fair scorecard. I can agree with a couple of people that say if it's 115, 113 Zepeda, because the fight was pretty close. But one, with the champion, you have to beat him, and you have to kind of beat him convincingly. And 2, you were in Ramirez's hometown. It's very, very tough to beat a guy in his hometown. So Cepeda did the work now, and I got to give him credit. He fully showed that if he had a little more powerful, or he was a more natural junior welterweight, he probably would have bettered a little bit better. But he is coming up from lightweight. And with Jose Ramirez being a little off, I think it's mainly more that southpaw orthodox dynamic, because he hasn't fought a lot of southpaws, and that will always throw a fighter off, particularly a fighter that comes forward the way Ramirez does. But it's a fight where all scorecards are fair, and I have no problem with somebody saying 115, 113 Cepeda. You can say run it back again, but you probably expect a more decisive Ramirez victory after that.
I'll go to you, Gail. Your breakdown of the fights. For me, in looking at it, at the styles and whatnot, and their resumes and who they fought in video, I thought that Zepeda, being the smaller guy, would kind of wilt as the fight went on. I knew he would get off to a good start because he's an excellent boxer, better hand speed. But I've seen Zepeda where he's been hurt badly and put down as a result of body shots. I felt that Ramirez would get to him with the body and eventually stop him late, but turned out to be far from the case, as Zepeda did very well of standing up to Ramirez's punches. I felt stunned him once, and he was, in the end, even though Ramirez came on late, Zepeda was right there to the end.
I couldn't agree more. Now let's remember, the night before, Freddie Roach had a fighter lose because the other guy executed a perfect game plan in Cancio against Machado, based in large part on body work, right? So he'd already gotten burned the night before. I can't help but think that factored a little bit in to the advice and direction he had given Zepeda. And obviously, they made up their game plan long before the night before the fight. But it seemed that fed into it a little bit. Here was a guy who could win the fight as long as he stayed disciplined, executed his game plan, and maybe had a little luck on his side. So if you acknowledge that maybe a little bit of Cancio's win came from Machado having not the greatest night, here you've got Ramirez. I agree, not the best night. Every guy is definitely entitled to that night where they're just off. It's just sometimes so hard to pin down what it really is, but you just know you're not firing on all cylinders. If you're good enough, you prevail, you move on. Then it happens. In this case, I thought Ramirez was in trouble. And although he came on strong near the end, boy, I would have given it very narrowly to Cepeda. I thought we might have upset number 2 of the weekend in store. It was not to be. For whatever reason, the judges saw Ramirez doing enough to win. The judges are the first row of the audience. Sometimes when a hometown crowd is behind somebody and, oohing and awing at everything they do, it can't help but affect them. I wonder if that was part of it here. But, boy, Zepeda, I'm sure, caused them a lot of nervous moments while they were waiting for the cards to be read, and good for him. It was truly a good effort. I really did think he narrowly won the fight. I wouldn't call it a robbery because it was that close, and I wasn't sitting ringside. In fact, I was sitting in an Irish bar in Palm Springs watching the fight, if the truth be told. So that's the way it looked to me.
Your reaction to the fight, Jacob? Who did you have winning?
I had Zepeda winning. I thought that an interesting part of this fight was that Ramirez haven't been coached or trained previously by Freddie Roach. I believe was able to give Zepeda a good game plan and some insight. Ramirez, he's a good fighter, but he's not, in my opinion, is not very dynamic. I mean, he has a great conditioning. Like he can go rounds and rounds, but he's very much a straight, come forward fighter, looking to land shots. And I thought Zepeda especially in the early rounds was boxing him and just landing, Ramirez is getting hit a lot. But he was just landing, his punches and moving and doing a good job. Ramirez did eventually, start to get to Cepeda. But I also gave Zepeda the 11th round. I thought that was a clear round for Cepeda in the championship rounds. But again, he's in Fresno, the house that Ramirez built. 14,000 people, I think, is what they had there. So I think even Freddie Roach said in the corner, he's like, we got to knock this guy out or knock him down at least because we're in his home turf. Like they're not going to give it to us. So again, I agree with Gail. It's not a robbery. I am disappointed in the cards. But there was probably about 3 or 4 rounds that could have gone either way. So, you can see, some of those cards that came out, but I thought Zepeda at least deserved a draw. And even with the draw, Ramirez still keeps his belt. But I thought he did enough to at least deserve the draw.
I'm going to ask you guys the same question that I asked of Tank Davis following his win. Direction that you see Ramirez going. With Regis Progress contemplating leaving the World Boxing Super Series tournament, he's out there. Ramirez also talked about unifying the title. You got Maurice Hooker. He's out there. He also mentioned possibly moving up to 147 pounds. So just like I asked about the future of one Tank Davis, the future for Jose Ramirez.
He better not. I heard when they were talking about Bud moving up to fight Bud, I was like, oh my God.
I didn't even mention that. I wasn't even going to go there because that's laughable.
Well, I mean, Bud would destroy this guy. I think he would literally take him apart. And but I mean, they're both top ranked guys, and if he's going to move to 147, everybody else is across the street. All the other top guys, pretty much. I mean, Crawford is going to pretty soon find it hard to, have a dance partner. I mean, I know he's got Amir Khan, but I mean, he's running out of people to fight, within the top ranked stable. But, yeah, I don't think they'll give Zepeda a rematch. He deserves it, but I don't know. I mean, he's an exciting guy. I mean, he's going to pack that place. I know he wants to get to that kind of pay-per-view Vegas level at some point, but I don't know. I mean, this might be his sweet spot. I don't expect too many things from Ramirez. I think he's limited in his abilities. Like he seems like a good guy, and he seems like he works hard, and he's going to be a tough fight for a lot of people. But I don't know. I don't see a whole lot from him.
Daniel Gale, the future for one Jose Ramirez. Do you think Top Rankers is such going to do not what they did for Tony Lopez, but what happened for Tony Lopez, say back in the late 80s, early 90s, basically base him in his hometown and get as many defenses out of him as they can?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, because think about it. In Fresno, California, he filled out 15,000 seats. So, yeah, I could see them doing that unless a big fight comes. Now, like we talked about last week, programming the World Boxing Super Series, that's tangible now. And that's a fight that Program wants. And there are really no hurdles to making that fight. Maurice Hooker, there may be just a broadcasting hurdle because it'll be ESPN versus the Zone. Even though, like I said, even though ESPN has always said that they will not stop a big fight, they haven't been put in the position where they had to make that choice. The move up to 147. That to me is just Top Rank having the contingency plan for, like what Jacob mentioned when Bud finds it that he does not have that many dance partners, you start building them. Remember, it's kind of what happened when it came to Floyd, and when it was the Cold War between Top Rank and Golden Boy. The guy you want to fight is on the other side, so you build up opponents for him in the meantime. And it's probably going to start going to be happening to Bud, unless they really force the issue with Spence. So yeah, I could see Ramirez doing that. I have even less faith, unfortunately, than Jacob would in a fight against Bud. He's just not that level. I'm sorry. I like Jose Ramirez. I like his story. I do like his style to fight. It is entertaining, but Bud is more than he can chew and then some. So I hope when he stays in 140, you can fight Perker, you can fight Hooker. You can fight people. Your division is pretty good right now. I would shoot for Prograis right now because that's the fight that probably needs to happen 140 that makes it really exciting because both those guys will bring it.
That's the fight I want to see. Prograis said after the fight on Twitter that he would make easy work of one Ramirez. I go to you, Gail. A fight with Maurice Hooker would be an excellent fight as well. Where do you see Jose Ramirez going moving forward?
I agree very much with what's been said so far. You gotta love what he stands for. It's been an ongoing theme tonight on this edition about the sport of boxing needing guys like a Daniel Cancio, needing guys like a Jose Ramirez. And what a great thing to put 15,000 fans in the seats in the Central Valley of California over and over and over. A big market is developing for boxing there, not just to go see Jose Ramirez, but those are the folks that are going to sign up for ESPN Plus because they've gotten to see a title fight in person and they remember it. That it sticks with them. Well, next thing they know, they're getting to zone, and they're hooked, and you've got the next generation of fans. And the more that, Ramirez can fill those seats there, make checks, great. Is he at the level of Hooker or Prograis? No, he probably isn't. However, he probably will have to fight those guys eventually. He should test himself. Prograis has made absolutely no secret of wanting Ramirez for a long time. I mean, Ramirez has been in his gun sights. So I would like to see him fight Hooker first. I think of the two, Ramirez probably has a little better shot against Hooker. And if he's got to fight outside of Fresno, if he's got to fight outside of California, hey, I think he'd get a darn good reception if they staged the fight in Texas, in front of Hooker's fans. I think he'd have a lot more trouble going to New Orleans to fight Prograis or another major market venue. And, maybe that's a fight they take somewhere else. Frankly, that is a fight they could easily stage in Texas as well. So there are good options for us fans. For Ramirez, maybe he'll surprise us. And if he really just did have a bad night the other night, maybe that's so fresh in our minds we're not seeing his potential for making those other fights competitive. But I'd be hard-pressed to pick Ramirez as a winner over Prograis for sure. Hooker might be a little more even of a fight.
I'm going to some news segment here. Well, I will say that first of all, that Prograis is the fight I would like to see Ramirez again fight eventually. Hooker would not be in that bad option as well. As would a possible fight against Josh Taylor, who's ranked technically #1 in the WBC. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe Taylor's handlers pull up the money and bring Jose Ramirez over to fight in the UK. That would be a good option as well. Let's move on to some news here, and going to start the news segment by responding to a question in the Facebook chat. Big Rotten Apple. His question is, any thoughts on Marcos Maidana's return to the ring? I hear he has a 3-fight deal with PBC, so I'm just going to open it up for you guys here. Thoughts on the return of Marcos Maidana, who said he's going to come out of retirement and fight in 2019, as well as the rumored deal he has with PBC.
When's his first heavyweight fight? I'll be there.
Now, Jacob. He can make the cruiserweight limit easy, please.
Usyk, watch out, Usyk. Here comes Maidana.
Oh my God, where does the humor on this end? I honestly, if someone had bet me money on this happening, I would have lost. I absolutely would have lost. I'm just still gobsmacked over the whole thing. I'm having trouble finding my words right now. The only thing I can possibly imagine is that PBC dangled enough money in front of him, and he talked to his advisors and his family, and he thought, welterweight, other than Bud Crawford, really, nobody's burning up the welterweight division. Hell, why not fight some of these guys if the money's there? And, I could buy another ranch and cook a lot more steaks. So what the hell?
Your reaction, Daniel, to the planned return of Marcos Maidana?
Oh, wow. I thought it was an Onion article when I first heard it. I'll be honest.
Yes.
But
perfect.
But apparently what he said to an Argentinian newspaper was that he saw Keith Thurman fight, and he saw Manny fight, and he said, I could beat these two. So apparently he's the one that made the call to PBC and then said, I'll fight those guys. Just make an offer. And they did. So if it's a 3-fight
that's how
deal,
it went down. I do understand that from an intellectual standpoint of him looking at these guys and thinking, geez, yeah, I got this. That's easy to say when you're sitting on your well-fed backside in Argentina. When he really has to start training.
Can he beat the skill? Yeah, can he beat the skill? That's the thing.
Yeah, that's my question.
Maidana looks like he ate 3 Madonnas. That's what he looks like.
Because the last time I saw photos of Maidana, he looks like he may be close, if not a little bit over 200 pounds.
I don't think he's that heavy. No.
I think he's heavier actually.
No, is he really? No.
Yeah, he just carries he carries the weight pretty well. He's kind of like me in a way. Like we're short, but we're stocky, so we don't really look that big. At least in the fat department, but you can tell we're pretty big, even though I'm slimming down right now.
No.
That's what Maidana has to do. I think the first fight is going to be it's a tune-up fight, because it's going to take at least 6 months to him to get even close to the welterweight limit.
But didn't he have problems? Didn't he have problems making weight when he was an active fighter?
No,
at 140.
I don't remember. Yeah, 140 when he moved up. No.
Well, and now he's older, and he's got to lose more weight. That seems like a tall task.
So he's he's listed at 5'7". I don't know that it is heaviest. He would, he might have been one of those guys that puts it on in the face. We've all seen guys blow up that way. But do you really think he gained more than 50 pounds? That would still keep him under 200.
With that shirt on, and it's like, it's very well possible, Gail.
Jeez.
Yeah, those churrasco steaks are pretty popular in Argentina, and it's not like he's gonna have to pay for any of them. Now,
no. I mean, definitely when he retired, we thought he'd all retired for good. I mean, absolutely no question that he packed it back on. But I didn't think I didn't think there would really honestly be a 2 in front of the weight number.
Yep.
You know, although the only
check the chat. Check the chat.
Yeah, I've seen him a couple of times because his brother Fabian fought at StubHub, aka Dignity Center or whatever the hell. Jacob, you must have seen him there. You know, he shows up in his Hawaiian shirt and his pork pie hat and a cigar, you know, posing for pictures, and it's like, life is good. Life is really good. So, but he didn't look that heavy. Jeez. But hey, yeah, well, you know, we'll know. I mean, he'll know pretty quick whether he could take that weight right back off. And maybe part of what he has done that we don't know about is, you know, maybe for a couple of weeks, a month, he decided to tighten up his diet, get back in the gym, and just see how quick he could start dropping weight. And if the first few weeks have been really easy, maybe he thought, I got this. We all know it's the last 10 pounds that are the hardest. And for him, it's going to be the last 5. So, you know, we'll see.
Thanks for the question. Go ahead. Last word, Daniel.
Sorry about that. But I'm part of it is thinking, what if this is just a little bit of revenge, like countryman revenge for, particularly aimed at Manny for essentially retiring Matisse?
Nah.
I don't think I'd be willing to come out of retirement to avenge somebody. I don't know that they're that tight anyway.
I mean, why would he?
I never heard that they were tight.
Yeah, I think they're from kind of different edges of the country. But you know, maybe he looked at Broner getting beat down, and also Thurman not having a very good outing, and thinking, how much worse could I do? Hell. If somebody's willing to pay me to try, why not? And you know what happens to a lot of people when they retire? They get bored. They just get bored. They don't really land on anything that makes them wake up in the morning. And maybe this is what he needed. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So want to thank Big Rotten Apple for the question. And Overhand, he also joined us in the YouTube chat. He says that Madonna is done. If he tries to come back to the top, he'll get hurt bad. Yeah. Moving on to some more news. Last week, we talked about Richard Commey winning the vacant IBF lightweight title against Chimaev. Isa Chimaev. He stopped him in 2 rounds. Well, that bout was supposed to set up a unification bout with current WBO lightweight champion Vasiliy Lomachenko. Well, in the aftermath of Commey's bout, he complained that he feared that he hurt his hand. MRI subsequently took place Thursday last week. Come to find out, Commey has some damage to his knuckle. Going to need 6 weeks of preparation. So the question here, for everybody here in the chat, on the panel, excuse me, where does Lomachenko go from here? The Commey bout with Lomachenko was planned. The word was it's going to happen April 12th. Bob Arum, in the aftermath of Commey's injury, said that Lomachenko still plans on fighting April 12th. For me, it seems to be one logical conclusion in terms of substitute. That's Anthony Crulla. Ranked number 1, Hearn, when he found out about the injury to Commey, said that Lomachenko, he has to fight Crulla. So your thoughts here on the future for Vasiliy Lomachenko? Is it basically a given now he's going to fight Anthony Crulla next?
Yeah, it looks to be the case.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they've got a date. The clock is ticking, and they're going to need to get that in place to be able to pull off the fight. And Top Rank, and especially ESPN, they're doing very, very good ratings with Loma. They don't want fans to forget him. So they're going to want to put together a fight in April. And that really is the best of the available options that are realistic.
I agree. Move on to one more bit of news before we move on to preview a couple of fights over the weekend. I think it was 2 shows back. We talked about the future of Anthony Joshua. Would he fight a rematch against Dillian White in April, or would he come to the U.S. and fight Big Baby Miller? In the time post that discussion here on Pound for Pound, though it hasn't been announced officially, all indications are that Anthony Joshua coming to the States for his next bout, making his U.S. debut, and will indeed fight Big Baby Miller. I think the date is June 1st, I believe it is, at MSG. I'll go to you first, Jacob, and then Gail and Daniel. Your reaction to the fact that it looks like Joshua, that Big Baby is going to get his opportunity after all that talk. He's going to get his opportunity at one Anthony Joshua.
I have to say I like this fight. Big Baby's been. I like him. I think he's entertaining. He's got a unusual. He's just a big dude, and so I think that can potentially give Joshua problems in some different ways, and a challenge. So as opposed to some of the guys he's been fighting, so I think it's interesting. We had talked about Dillian White. I think they offered him the fight, but there seems to be some type of reason from Dillian White's side, like money or some sort of reason why they couldn't close that fight down. So, and they had to give up their Wembley date. So, I just want Joshua to get back in the ring. Obviously we want to see the Wilder fight, but he's fighting, Tyson Fury. It looks like that fight's going to be all but done soon enough. And I believe that's going to also be on the East Coast. But, I like this fight. I said, White deserved it more, but I wanted to see Big Baby fight him because we haven't seen that matchup yet. We've seen the Joshua White matchup. So this will be something interesting.
Gail, Daniel, your reaction to the news that it looks like that Joshua's coming to the U.S., going to make his United States debut against Jarrell Big Baby Miller.
Well, if it can't be any of the other opponents because the timing is just a problem, I don't hate it. Miller's talked a lot of smack. Let's see what he can do. I think we all know what's going to happen, but this will be a good introduction to the broader American audience. We assume that Joshua is a household name here. He's really not. So this is precisely the kind of introduction that will get American fans excited. It'll be a fun lead up. Miller's a big talker. Joshua's a great interview. That to me will be far more interesting than the fight itself, most likely. That's okay. That happens. Given that, Fury and Wilder, where they stand. To me, unfortunately, the guy sort of left standing around without a dance partner is Dillian White. And that's a shame. We'll see what happens with him. But I'll repeat our favorite reaction, when it isn't exactly what we hoped for, but it's better than nothing. I don't hate it.
Don't hate it. Your reaction, Daniel, to Joshua Big Baby Miller coming to New York.
Well, I always found it a bit funny that, like I said, when they came to the Joshua news, it always came in on the precipice of Wilder Fury news coming out. And I mentioned this when this idea was first announced, that Joshua not waiting till not waiting till April 13th to get his way to Wembley, and ultimately going to June 1st is a sign of surrender in a way from Eddie Hearn. He's acknowledging that despite the championships, he does not have the most interesting heavyweight that can grab the public's attention right now. That's either Wilder or Fury. And so now you have to introduce introduce Anthony Joshua to the American audience. And right now, the most serviceable fighter is the fighter you promised to fight to, which is Jarrell, Big Baby Miller. He has talked a lot of smack. Like, he asked them out to back it up. So when it comes down to it, Miller can handle the brunt of the promotion, while Joshua does the little bit and gets the pictures and such until the fight happens. The only thing that's a little bit bad when it comes to Dillian Whyte is apparently they really wanted to lowball Dillian Whyte. But Dillian has a sensible argument that you can't have Anthony Joshua, you get paid this amount of money, and the pay disparity be this much a lot of money when, since the first fight you two had, granted, yes, Joshua knocked you out, but you fought pretty well since then. Yes, there has been a couple of fights that looked iffy. The first Chisora fight is the first one that comes in my head. But you've done your job. You fought eliminator after eliminator after eliminator. And you technically earned your shot at a little bit of weight, whether it's against Joshua or Wilder. Now, Wilder, you know he has bigger fish to fry. Joshua, not really, because like Big Baby could be considered on the same level as Dillian Whyte in the way it's like a prospect. You don't really give him a chance, but he's a pretty good prospect, and he's gonna carry things into the fight. So I'm not surprised that they would go this route. It's just, to me, it's an admission from Eddie Hearn that's saying, despite my words, despite all the proclamations, I do not have the most interesting heavyweight on the planet right now.
You know, I'm not upset about Joshua coming to the U.S. To fight Big Baby. My question is, what kind of shape Big Baby Miller will be in? Will he finally actually lose weight in order to get ready to this fight instead of gaining weight like he has for his last few fights, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger? Or will he really take things seriously in terms of a conditioning standpoint to give himself the best shot of winning here? That's my only question. That's my only question. If he does take his conditioning seriously, yeah, it could be a real entertaining scrap. If not, you know, Joshua will do what he will against Big Baby, eventually beat him and beat him up. And I see Jacob, he had to dip out, catch the train home from the job. So I want to thank Jacob for joining us on the show. Let's get into the preview segment here, preview some fights that's coming up. Starting on the 15th of February, Rob Brant, October last year, scored one of the biggest upsets in 2018, defeating Murata. Not only defeating him, but defeating him handily, Gale. He makes his first defense of WBA title Friday in his home state of Minnesota against a fighter by the name of Baysangurov. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Baysangurov. Your thoughts on the fight, Gail?
This is Brant's victory lap, and he deserves it. He richly earned it. What I like seeing is Top Rank giving him the opportunity to develop that fan base there in, how did you pronounce the name of the state? You did such a good job.
Minnesota.
This is something Top Rank does really, really well. Look what they just did in Fresno with Ramirez. They have been able to build that appetite up for boxing there in the Central Valley of California. They've done the same thing in Nebraska with Bud Crawford. Here they got a guy that got an opportunity to do this in Minnesota with not just Brant, but some of the other guys that are up there. So they're giving him the victory lap fight, get his local fans into the seats, give them an opportunity, with every chance, all the cards stacked in his favor, to give him a little bit of an easy fight after that barn burner he had with Ryota Murata, which was truly a great fight to watch, to attend, and one of last year's more surprising fights. So good for him. I hope he really enjoys it. After that, he's going to have to look at taking on somebody a little tougher. And one of the questions we'll need to have answered is, hey, can Rob Brant fill an arena? I don't know what the capacity of the venue is, but can he sell that out? That will determine, in large part, what happens to him next. If he's making some money for them up there, they're going to go right back to the well. We'll see.
Your thoughts on the fight, Daniel?
I'm happy that this is a good victory lap. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't do a rematch with Murata immediately, but I get it. Like there's a possible chance that Murata could still fight Golovkin, and you got to give Rob Brant a little bit of a victory lap. This is it, and this is going to be a very, very fun affair. And well, Minnesota's got to cheer for something. Got to cheer for something other than snow. I'll give them that.
Yeah. Hey, now that football season's over, they got to spend their money on something.
Indeed, this fight with Brant, his first title defense is taking place Friday. The following night, Leo Santa Cruz, featherweight titleist, finally making his return to the ring after 9-10 month layoff. He's fighting in LA against Rafael Rivera. I'll go to you, Daniel. Is this just basically an easy work for Santa Cruz to get himself back into the swing of things?
Yes. To put it bluntly, yes. We'll always say, we've seen this over the past week. Yes, upsets can happen, but then there's fights where it's not going to happen. In this case, in this one, because they really do need Santa Cruz to get back up there, because Oscar Valdez is now back in the picture and looked pretty good in his comeback. The star of the division right now is Josh Warrington. And unfortunately, we don't know what Gary Russell Jr. is going to do, because he's in this 1 fight year rule that he has for himself. So,
well, he recently said he's going to try to fight more than once a year, so who knows?
Yeah, I believe it when I see it. So, in that sense, it's a big tune-up, and it's in a division where, like I said, all the players are in his yard almost.
Your thoughts on? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Daniel.
No, I was about to say I got a hiccup.
Your thoughts on this fight, Gail, and will you be in attendance?
I will not be in attendance. I will watch. Yeah. Leo Santa Cruz is just a fighter that makes me scratch my head over and over. There have been so many times where he could have really pressed his foot down on the gas pedal and become a much bigger star and player than he is. Then he makes these odd left turns here and there, fighting these frankly inconsequential fights. This kid that he's facing, Rivera, local kid from Tijuana, Baja California, he's only been 12 rounds once before in his entire career, and he lost a unanimous decision to Jojo Diaz at the time. That was about a year and a half ago. That was on the undercard of the first Canelo Golovkin fight. He's had a few other fights since. He lost one of those in a split decision to Joet Diaz. Then he had a nice little KO against a guy with a losing record in that hot spot of Ontario, California. So, Rivera's been a very good soldier, taking these fights in Southern California. But, I don't want to insult him by referring to pizza delivery or Uber, but come on, really? Leo Santa Cruz should not be fighting 24-year-old kids, with this sort of record. I mean, he just shouldn't. God bless him. I hope this is a good paycheck for Rivera. I hope he shows himself well, but please. This is not a fight where I'm going to say I don't hate it, because you know what? I do hate it. I do. And that's partially why I'm not going to be there.
I think we're going to start shutting the show down on that note. Tell us how you really feel.
I was just going to say, did that hurt? Was there some singeing going on there? Sorry, guys.
First of all, I want to say thanks to Big Rotten Apple Overhand for joining us in the live YouTube public chat. If you like what you've heard this evening, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Also, subscribe to us on iTunes and SoundCloud, particularly iTunes, and leave us a 5-star review. Leave a review there. It really help boost up the ratings there. Go to the panel here for anyone, for Gail, for Communities Digital News, for anyone who wants to talk boxing, for anyone who want to talk Game of Thrones, Dancing with the Stars, small business advice. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Oh, right now I've got I had half an eye on the Westminster Kennel Club dog show. You want to talk real sports? Dog shows, damn it. You can find me at Communities Digital News. My regular column is there, which is at COMM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I, News, comdiginews.com. On the Instagram and the Twitter, I'm PR Pro San Diego. And you can see in some of those places coverage of the Machado Cancio card. Some of the backstage video is there. And I will say on the Santa Cruz undercard, you have Omar Figueroa fighting John Molina Jr. Oh, yeah. And then you've got the barn burner between Hugo Centeno and Oscar Cortez. Hey, now.
Indeed. I want to thank Jacob for joining us on the show. You want to talk boxing or movies with him, because you can also find him on the Wrong Reel podcast, which discusses movie. You can check him out on Twitter, JRATM23. You can also check him out, Jab Hook Boxing. Please check out Jab Hook Boxing, including his last 2 articles. He recently wrote some articles about an article about one Adrien Broner, and an interesting article about the criticism of one Canelo Alvarez. So please check him out on Jab Hook Boxing. You can follow him on Twitter at JRATM23. Daniel from the Inscriber. For those who want to talk to Sweet Science, for those who want to check you out clapping back at nonsense on Twitter, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99. I do have a pod up, actually, if we're going to do NBA, where I discuss the major deals at the NBA trade deadline.
And excellent analysis. I listened to that a couple of days ago and left a comment there. So,
yeah, and considering Magic Johnson's fucking up again, yeah, it's going to open up a lot of avenues. But especially in boxing, like tomorrow night is going to be my pod with the folks, Joe Francis. We weren't able to do it this week. It got really busy, but definitely we'll be talking about it tomorrow night. Talk about these fights. Talk some news coming up, and hopefully, like I said, I'm just crossing my fingers. Maybe we'll find out that Michael Spadano's been rickrolling us.
Wouldn't that be great? Oh my God.
If you want to talk boxing or music or fitness with me, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. If you check the rather page, you'll find links to where to find Pound for Pound Boxing Report, not only all over social media, but wherever you can find platforms that carry podcasts. And again, let donation be the best nation. 50 cents, $1, $2, $5. I don't care if you have some spare change. Please shoot some of it with the Pound for Pound Box Report. Got 2 apps there. Cash Me app, a Cash Me app as well as PayPal. So please, if you can spare, if you have a little spare change, once again, donate some money to Pound for Pound Box Report, because very few things are free, including the production of this podcast. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Rob Brant and his fight against Baysangurov, Leo Santa Cruz, his fight against Rivera, and we will do a preview of Anthony Durrell. He's going to be fighting for the vacant super middleweight title, the title that was stripped from David Benavidez because David Benavidez a positive drug test for cocaine. We will preview that fight. WBO #1 contender at light heavyweight Anthony Yard. He's going to be fighting a guy by the name of Travis Ruiz. By the way, you can catch that fight, Yard and Reeves, on ESPN Plus. ESPN Plus is going to carry that. And grudge match happening over in the UK. Also on the 23rd, James DeGale, Chris Eubank. Showtime has decided to pick that up so you can watch that fight live. So we'll preview all of those fights. We may talk Brandon Rios. I'm not sure. He's going to be fighting all on the weekend of the 23rd as well. So, yeah, once again, I want to thank Big Rotten Apple. I want to thank Overhand for joining us in their commentary in the live YouTube chat. I want to thank Jacob for joining us also early in the show. For Gil from Communities Digital News, Daniel from The Inscriber, I am your host, Michael. This has been episode 240 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.